United States in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish the Constitution for the United States of America.
My son is 44 years old. If he were to be cared for in an institutional setting, it would have to be something called a long-term acute care hospital because of the level of need for care for his tracheostomy, care for his PEG feeding tube, and all of his medical issues that he has to deal with. Not only would that cost roughly 4 or 5 times as much as the services he gets at home, but it would also mean that he would spend all of his days in a hospital room, in a hospital bed. Today, Gabe he still lives with his mother and I, but he goes to movies, he goes to live musical events, which he's a big fan, he gets to watch sporting events, he gets to participate in all of the family activities, he's there for birthdays and for coloring Easter eggs. When I have friends come over and we play guitar and do some jamming, Gabe loves to sit in and participate in all of those things. You want another song before we quit?
Yeah. You want Puff?
Puff? We could do Cotton Mill Girls.
Puff?
So, Gabe is living a life of an American in an American community, doing the things that Americans like to do. He has real freedom and real choice and real liberty. You might be able to get tracheostomy care in a long-term acute care hospital, but you don't get any of the rest of that stuff. We can keep you alive, but they don't give you much to live for. But the point of home and community-based services is to allow people to live in their own homes in regular neighborhoods, as opposed to living in nursing homes or facilities for people with developmental disabilities or group living arrangements or any of those things. So the home and community-based services are services that are designed to go into your home, into your neighborhood, and to give you the supports you need so that you don't have to live in an institution.
So we live in Moscow, Idaho, and Larkin's lived here pretty much his whole life. And I've lived here about the last 12 years. And we have lots of friends and family, and Moscow's home to us. I'm like most people. I really enjoy cooking and spending time with my friends and family, and I really enjoy being part of the Moscow community.
Yeah. You want to hold the bears? Yeah. Now we're here. We're all of the market.
So he said, I'm 36 years old and I have cerebral palsy, but I'm pretty much like everyone else in the United States. You like the same things as every other 36-year-old. You like to work, watch lots of sports. Lots of sports. And like to travel. We try to travel when we can and see family in as much as the country as we can. I also have cerebral palsy. There's a wide range of cerebral palsy, and I have a hearing impairment. So I have 2 different things that challenge me daily, but don't stop us.
I have 2 children, ages 16 and 13, that are both on the autism spectrum disorder. My older son, Mark, who is 16, has a lot more challenges with his developmental disability. And so every day is a constant struggle to communicate clearly with him and make sure that he is also can communicate clearly with us. And this is so important because every day we are always assessing behavior and trying to figure out what it's telling us and what does this behavior mean, what does that behavior mean. We use the Family Directed Services to hire a community support worker to take him out in the community every day.
My name is Joshua Wetzel. I'm on Medicaid. Me and my brother are. I have a helper named Connor. Every Saturday I go to farmer's market and he's there to assist me. He's there to help me get stuff out and help me get change and help me run the stand when I need to use the bathroom.
These activities would not be possible without the Family Directed Services and the Medicaid support that we get for that. And this has been a great relief for our family. It gives me a couple, 2 or 3 hours where I know Mark's being cared for, and they get to go out in the community.
Evan, he's 9, and he's awesome. He's the coolest kid you'll ever meet. But he has a genetic disorder that causes tumors to grow on every organ in his body. All the therapy in the world isn't going to help him if Mom can't be supportive of him, and if I can't encourage him and sort of reinforce what they're doing in therapy, then we're going to be successful. We're a team. So without these therapies, I don't know how to help him. There are people out there, there are educated people who know how to help him, but we can't access them on our limited income. We need help, so let's help.
My brother's older than me by 3 years. He was born brain damaged at birth and was institutionalized for 20 years. He gives a lot. He's a character and people love him, and all these guys in the group home that he's in are wonderful. It takes a lot of people to really keep him safe and sound, and he's 68 years old. I have to bathe him, I have to brush his teeth, I have to do his toenails. You know, he's not capable of doing all that stuff. So the fact that he's in an assisted living center during the week and then I have him on the weekends makes it possible for me to have some kind of a life. And we are utterly dependent on Medicare, Medicaid, to help with all of the things that he needs. So we really have to work as a team with other community members to really give them a fulfilling life. I don't know how I would take care of him, just flat out. I'm working, I try to work full time. I'm usually working 3 jobs. He can't be home alone. I can't imagine how I could take on all the expenses that he has. We don't have any family money to cover this stuff. We've always been very involved in helping create services, volunteer at service centers, but financially, there's nothing there. There's no extra.
It started off as a traumatic brain injury when I was born. An aneurysm blew up in my head. And I have a cognitive impairment / cognitive disability. And without the help of Medicaid, I would not be in very good shape. I would pretty much be lost to the world. Medicaid has saved me from that, and it's kept me on the right path. And without Medicaid, I would be lost. I mean, people with disabilities are people too, and we need to be recognized as people. I mean, everybody should be treated the same, not differently. We will not go back to the days when we were in institutions.
I am 25 years old. As I just moved out, I have a great opportunity to go to ISU and go to school for what I enjoy. Is I want to be a biologist and keep the world beautiful and preserved to everybody else can see and enjoy the benefits of the wilderness. Well, you know, I was born with cerebral palsy on my right side, so, you know, I had a limp arm and a limp leg, and I can't really see out of my right eye that well, but I still, you know, had major surgeries to get that corrected. I moved out completely on my own. I got this great setup. I'm doing everything by myself. I go to school 5 days a week, plus I worked weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, doing cashiering at Walmart. So I'm doing the stuff that everybody else can do, but just in my own way. I grew up on the Fort Hall Reservation ever since I was, you know, I can remember. I grew up hunting, fishing, and, you know, doing such and such stuff. So I did grow up outdoorsy, and I grew up loving the outdoors, and I love being independent. And that's what my family taught me, is being independent, no matter, you know, what the situation is. Do what you can, and don't rely on anybody else to do it for you.
Look at me. I ride horses. I do just about everything a person that don't have a disability can do. People with disabilities has a right to live as freely as people that don't have disabilities.
I am the mother of 3 children who have Medicaid benefits. We adopted 3 children with autism, and they have used Medicaid all their little lives. They're now heading into adulthood. We needed these kids in our lives. We adopted them for a reason, but as far as the financial burden of helping them to become their best, would not have been possible. Would not have been possible. And they're amazing people. Now that they're adults, I've got one just finishing high school and the other 2 are out of school. Various levels of employment and lots of support from the community, and they're very supportive to the community. When the kids were in school, a lot of the services that were being provided by the school, because school budgets are not what they should be, especially for special education purposes. There's a lot of therapy that can be continued at school, so we had to give permission for the school district to bill Medicaid for some of the services the kids were receiving at school. When the doctors prescribed X number of hours of speech or OT, and some of those were performed at school, in Idaho, the school can then bill Medicaid for some of those services. If they could not, I think the kids would have received less care. And when your child's in school, they're in school more than they are at home and more than they are anywhere else. So it's really important that the services are administered at school, and it's important that the kids have the continuity of services outside of school and services inside of school. And sometimes in a small area like this, that was the self-same therapist, and that was awesome. They could see them during school and help them adjust to that social environment, and then come to the home and help them understand how to be vocal, verbal, and have social skills in a home environment, and take them out into the community. And all of that was supported by Medicaid funds. It goes till 19, and then at 19 the kids have to be re-evaluated. And it's a grueling process, and there are gaps in it. There are months where there is no Medicaid, which can be months where there's no medication, there's no therapy, there's no support, but that's how the system's set up. And in those months, that's when you discover what it's like to be without Medicaid, and it is not a pretty picture.
I have 2 college degrees. I'm 42 years old. My medical diagnosis is cerebral palsy. A lot of people with disabilities, including myself, were scared because we don't exactly know the consequences, full consequences of what will happen without Medicaid. A lot of us would be institutionalized, and there has been a history of abuse, neglect, and, tragedy associated with institutions.
We have to remember that what happened before Medicaid for people with developmental disabilities, for example, was that they lived in horrible human warehouses like Pennhurst and Willowbrook.
Back in 1972, the Willowbrook State School was the subject of a famous expose.
The doctor invited me to see the conditions he was talking about, so unannounced and unexpected by the school administration, we toured building number 6. The doctor had warned me that it would be bad. It was horrible. There was one attendant for perhaps 50 severely and profoundly retarded children. Lying on the floor naked and smeared with their own feces, they were making a pitiful sound, a kind of mournful wail that it's impossible for me to forget. This is what it looked like, this is what it sounded like, but how can I tell you about the way it smelled? It smelled of filth, it smelled of disease, and it smelled of death.
I started working for Idaho's Protection and Advocacy system back in 1978. And in early 1979, I visited Idaho State School and Hospital. When I went out there in 1979, it was a dormitory type of setting. There were big rooms with 5 or 6 beds in them, people there who were not receiving any training. There was periodic outbursts of aggression and sometimes assaultiveness. There were people who were sitting in the corner banging their heads against the wall. No one was paying any attention to them banging their heads against the wall. There was frequent food poisoning from the institutional food. There was widespread, almost universal hepatitis C infections. And there was most notably pretty much no sign of happiness or joy.
I went to the state school in April 16, 1948. Oh, and I was 11 or 12 years old at that time. I remember some of them, see, when you first go there, in those days they put you in a room to see that you never brought any disease or anything, even if you were cleaned up. Nobody talked to me about anything, and I didn't know what was going to happen, and I thought, why, they sure have it in for me. I was always scared that I was going to get poisoned. So every time I ate anything, I just took a very little bite and checked everything out. And I was scared for a long time, but I never talked, and nobody talked to me about anything. And the first thing I saw was Janet Sykes, and somebody had upset her. She was very upset, and so she wore a straight jacket all the time, and it had a hole in it, and she had these real strong teeth, so she just tore it. She tore it straight down until it came off of her, and she was so upset, screaming and crying, and she went over that window, and she went through her arm, and she went through that window, but she was stripped naked, and after she done that, she had blood on her arm, and she went through that window. And that was the first thing I saw as soon as I got out of that room. I wasn't very old, that old. It scared me to death even some more. But I did have some experiences there which weren't very good. There was some of these employees that weren't doing right by the people, the patients, and also they didn't treat you very good. But anyway, the one thing that there was one employee there, and we thought she should be a patient, but they gave us Epsom salts with hot water to drink for a punishment. So we drank that, I bet you, every day, every day, the Epsom salt. I don't know who I said it to, but I said I was really surprised that some people like me didn't just die because we weren't treated right or fed right. And a lot of us come back from with the flu from the cannery, and Mrs. Denny said, all right, if you're all sick, we'll get you all a doctor. But she said, if you're just lazing around to get out of work, you're going back to the cannery. Then there was one girl, that isn't my story, maybe I shouldn't say, but she'd always run away from there. There was this other employee that would always get a strap and beat her with the strap every time she ran off. Of course, that punishment was they locked you up for, I don't know, weeks or more. and gave you a tray. You know, I had ulcers and a lot of different things after I left there. And I think that it was just as I was so young and everything when I went there, and then giving us all that stuff that was bad for you. And that makes your body sick. But see, if they got by with one thing like that, then I wouldn't put it past to that. And I'm sure it happened. And probably stuff that they wouldn't dare let anybody see happened. You know, I mean, they don't want to get caught. They gave me a test right before I left there, and they said I passed all of it, and I didn't have no business there. Well, if anybody had ever talked to me in the first place, they'd have knew that, you know. So that, it used to bother me, but, you know, I don't know more. And I stayed there 13 years in the state school.
When I first started working at what used to be called Nampa State School and Hospital in 1973, long before it became Southwest Idaho Treatment Center, we didn't have any in-service training. The only thing I was told was if you took someone's thumb and bent it down, you could get them to do anything that you wanted them to. And after someone showed me that, and I looked at how big these violent men were, I thought, boy, I'd get hurt doing something stupid like that. So I figured that wasn't a good technique. The social workers were told to tell family members, after you admit your son or daughter, do not come back and visit again for another year. Your children will be much better off if you don't come back for at least a year, because then they'll have a chance to acclimatize to what's going on. And we had 12 of the most violent, aggressive individuals who had probably ever come to the state institution living in close quarters on that facility, and they received very few services. The primary intervention we had at that time was to put people in timeout rooms and also to restrain them in a corner. One of my first experiences was to have a psychologist come on to 1B, it was called, and he saw someone becoming aggressive, and he told me to put that person in a straitjacket. I thought it was a bad idea. So I hid the straitjacket and tried to develop a relationship with that individual. And that relationship didn't come overnight, because these people had been mistreated in a lot of different environments. I think the people who lived on the violent men's ward had a lot of reason to fear people. Many of them had had very difficult family experiences, so they would have learned fear early on because of the abuse some of them received. And because they also had been abused at the institution, I think it would have been very difficult for them to find a reason not to be afraid of people. One man in particular, when he was just a child, his parents used to tie him up to a tree in the backyard, and then they would go to work. And other neighborhood children would come and taunt him and throw rocks at him. And when he came to the institution before I met him on this particular ward, he used to be in a straitjacket a lot of the time. The man I'm talking about had significant mental illness, and I think probably anybody would from all the horrible experiences he had. So when I first worked with him, we were all taught that when someone became violent on the ward, we would need to put them in a corner and restrain them in the corner. And sometimes we would hold someone for half hour longer until they calmed down. And for a long time I accepted the notion of doing that, because it seemed to work. But later I realized that if I didn't restrain people, and if I communicated with them and talked to them and tried to support them in a positive manner, I learned that they quit hitting me and they quit assaulting me. And I realized by being a nice person rather than an authoritarian person who was always going to put them in the corner when they became assaultive, I had a lot fewer problems. The employees of the institution used to have these sticks that were used to flush the toilets, but they were also used to beat people when they were not behaving appropriately. In fact, in those days, people would document that abuse sometimes and say that someone had gotten violent, so we had to calm them by hitting them with the flusher sticks. It was an accepted practice.
What happens with home community-based services is, first of all, they're individualized. That is, they don't look exactly the same for any two people, and that's a great feature of the services.
So fast, freight train going so fast. Please don't tell what train I'm on, and they won't know where I've gone.
I think sometimes there is a stereotype with, maybe it's a self-preconceived stereotype. I'm not really sure with some people who receive help, governmental help, as in Medicaid. You know, it was kind of a big pill for me to swallow, to be able to say, we need help with and we need Medicaid. Some of the services that, Medicaid in Idaho, Evan is able to receive all of the therapies that he needs, speech and language, pathology, occupational physical therapy, and they are huge for us.
The level of care I need is at the nursing home level. And without Medicaid, I would not be able to live in my own home. I would not be able to have the care providers come into my home twice a day, 7 days a week, and help me with housekeeping, help me do hygiene, help me just personal care. Medicaid services allow me to be able to participate in the community as a citizen rather than having to be in a nursing home or assisted facility living, and that means a lot.
The other thing about home community-based services is they're fundamentally about freedom and liberty. Okay? So when you live in when you live in a nursing home, your day is determined by the staff schedules, by the meal schedules, by when the nursing people are there to do whatever they're going to do. You make very few choices about your life. You don't get a job. You don't volunteer. Frequently, you don't get the opportunity to attend the church of your choice. So one of the things about home and community-based services is they're proof that freedom actually works. That if you let people follow their desires, if you give them the ability to pursue their happiness, they become healthier, they become more productive, they get jobs, they volunteer, they acquire responsibility, and they make friends, and they have their family to support them. All of these things reduce the burden on the state. So by providing a few things for a person's support, you allow them to take advantage of all of the natural supports around them. It allows people to be in their community, they get the supports that they need in their community, and they get to contribute to their community. They get to give back. They get to make other people happy. It's the American way. It's choice and freedom and liberty, and usually, within bounds, choice and freedom and liberty actually works.
Yeah, freedom means a lot to me. I mean, everybody has a right to be free, including people with disabilities. We all have a right to be free. Institutions are not the way to go. There are other ways to go, and institutions are not it.
being supported, I think, both the way Larkin and I have by our parents really taught us to be independent. So it's really hard to imagine what life would be like without community-based supports. I think, frankly, it's not a life that we want. One of the only alternatives, if you're going to take away community-based supports, most people with disabilities like ours end up in institutions or nursing facilities, even at young ages. Without the Medicaid supports, we wouldn't be able to live in our own home. We wouldn't be able to live together. So that's really important to us, and I think important to most people. And so it's very personal to me when people talk about cutting Medicaid because of the impact it'll have on our lives.
There's never been the capacity in our churches and charitable institutions to do this. This has been something that has been handled by first state and then now as a partnership, state and federal governments for over 60 years.
I mean, when I think of our congregation and people in need of extra care and support, I think, yes, they're in an ideal situation or an ideal world. Every person has lots of community members around them who love and support them and who can step in when extra things are needed. And we know that many of our most vulnerable people do not have those communities of support. There are many ways that churches are trying to step into gaps of coverage in our social safety net in many ways, and this is just too expensive and too big of a hole for us to step into as faith communities. And I come from a tradition of Mennonites who believe in mutual aid and for a long, long time resisted health insurance of any kind. And even Mennonites have had to say, we have to have insurance because we can't afford, to mutually aid, pay for every medical expense that is happening with people.
We also have home and community-based services for people with developmental disabilities that help them to get jobs. So we have community-supported employment is a core component of our one of our waivers.
I like working to work there to get paid. Now I'm making money. I like working with people. I'm gonna want of a plan.
That's my favorite. That's a good deal.
Next week we'll start training for rehab. I get to work at Walgreens next week.
So these things provide people with on-the-job coaches who help them train and become competent so that they can work at competitive wages in regular community employment situations. None of this stuff is covered by private insurance companies. These are disability-specific services that have been built over the years into the Medicaid system.
Larkin's been a critical part of our team for the past 18 years, as long as he's been working with us. We do engineering work, we do environmental work, we do restoration type work. So Larkin helps us manage and maintain our records. So he organizes and keeps track of the documents that we deliver to our clients, and as well as documents that come into our office. And he helps us get things coded and into it.
If we stop providing services for people in their homes and in the community, then those people deteriorate, their health deteriorates, their skills deteriorate, their mental health deteriorates. To me, it's just it's a tragedy that we'll just watch unfold if we don't come up with resources to be able to meet these people's needs. And it's not like there's a cheaper way to do it. We've got 60 years of experimenting with how to save money in these systems, and the home community-based services have been the system that saved the most money.
Most of the people who have a disabled family member are very socially active, very community active, very appreciative. My hour of volunteer work helps 20 families. And if I'm home with Skipper helping him by myself, then we're just isolated and the community falls apart. It's just that simple.
You can judge the success of a society and of a people by how they treat their most vulnerable population. And I think we will fail miserably if we do anything to detract from Medicaid and the way it supports our vulnerable populations, whether it's children, whether it's adults, whether it's people with disabilities, whether it's the elderly. It can be incredibly inhumane to force someone to live in conditions that are not great, to force them to go without the support they need, without the medication they need.
If we couldn't have the financial means to take Evan to his appointments, I don't think Evan would be here, honestly.
It's not just the physical or the mental disability or the condition they might have. It's social perceptions about disability. We're not expected to achieve anything, and if we do, it's inspirational and exceptional, right? Like, I am not the typical person with a disability. I'm exceptional because I want to live a life in the community, and I just think that that's wrong. People with disabilities are people, and they want the same things as everyone else.
To be honest with you, I would rather have a short life than be institutionalized. I don't want to be put in a group home. I'm 42 years old. After the kind of independence I've enjoyed and fought for over the last 20-something years, I don't want to lose it.
The impact on the family, which at this point is me, it's a domino of disaster. I mean, I can work and provide help and do volunteer work in the community because I have help with him, and Medicaid and Medicare make that possible. If all of the families who have disabled family members have to take that on alone, you're just tanking everybody who are otherwise able to do a lot for the community.
Mark right here, he needs somebody to take care of him after school so my mom can work. And if my mom can't work, then she can't support the family.
Let's help Evan. Let's help thousands of other people, other individuals in Idaho who have skills, who have value, who have meaning.
It's not just about blossoming and growing, it's about surviving. Without Medicaid, they won't. They literally will pass away. They won't have the coverage they need for in-home care or long-term care or severe and critical medical care. Medicaid supports all of those things. We're talking life and death here. We're not just talking whether my kid can have a successful job or not. For some people it will be they won't live. Medicaid supports their life and they won't live without it.
I don't think it's right to segregate anybody based on their disabilities. I just think that's a real bad idea. I think anything that could have been done at the institution could be done at the community. The state of Idaho just has to be willing to, invest the resources into doing that. Quite frankly, I wanted to be the one to close the door at Idaho State School and Hospital. I would have considered that a great honor if I could have shut the door on the last person.
When I started 40 years ago, the disability rights movement was a brand new human rights movement. As with every other human rights movement, it's never completely finished. We have dramatically reduced the populations in institutions, but some people remain. And now there are things that threaten our community-based services. So we once again have to go back and make sure that the things that we gained in the battles of the past are not taken away from us today. Our founders established this country and our Constitution for the purpose of securing the blessings of liberty for all of its citizens. Home and community-based services are the best thing we've done yet to secure the blessings of liberty for Americans with disabilities.